Hey guys, Shane here, so welcome to part 2 of my Panther 126 build. So in this video we're going to be detailing the hull, adding battle damage as well as adding some photo etch damage. So a lot of the techniques covered have been inspired by some of the videos that the Night Shift modeler has been doing over the last few weeks and months. So I'm going to have links to his channel in the video description. I'm sure most of you watch his stuff already. They're fantastic videos and well worth checking out. So a big thank you to his videos just for kind of inspiring me to try stuff on my build. So we're going to start off by just working on the lower hull tub of our late Panther here, or Panther G. So I want to have the suspension kind of listing to one side, so I'm going to start cutting off the locating nubs on the right side of the vehicle so I can put the suspension a little bit heavy on the right side, so there's a bit of a list to the right as shown on the real photograph of 126. So I'm just going to start removing them, and I'm just going to use an idea I picked up from IPMS Toronto's channel, where you just get some post-it notes, measure out how the suspension would normally sit, and match that with post-its, and then basically peel them away until you get a depression level you're happy with. And this is going to be my reference to ensure that all of the swing arms match up and line up with the ground. I'm just going to lock it all down with some weights just to make sure that sets correctly. It's a simple technique, but it works pretty well. So now I'm just going to move on again with some of the lower hull fittings. In this case it's going to be the final drives for the sprockets. I'm not going to do any detail work on these, you're not going to see them once the sprockets are in place. And as you can see, I'm using Revell Contacta for most of the hull fixtures at the moment. So when I'm doing these big items and assemblies, I prefer using Contacta over extra tin. It's a slower setting glue and it's a little bit easier to work with. So that's going to add the driver and co-driver periscopes. And now, since we're going to be adding battle damage, I'm going to add some styrene spacers or blanks, which are just pieces of styrene sheet, and it's going to glue them to the area where the vehicle was hit. So 126 took three 3-inch rounds from an M10, and that's going to simulate the thickness of the armor when we actually start creating that battle damage. So I'm going to start mounting the upper and lower hull, again just using Revell Contacta. So there was a slight warping in my kit. Bear in mind this kit's 24, 25 years old. So there's just a tiny bit amount of warping in the lower hull. So just to make sure everything lines up and stays aligned, I'm just going to take some rubber bands here or some elastic bands just to ensure that the fit is as well as can be expected. So now moving on to some photo etch. So I picked up Edard's pretty comprehensive set for this, about 3 or 4 frets in it. So I don't have a great experience with photo etch, so I just have some very basic tools, which are a few long nose pliers and a few tweezers. And for the most part, I kind of get away with it. I'm not too confident with photo etch, and it's one of the reasons why I picked to do this build, was just to kind of learn how to do new techniques I normally shy away from. So I'm just going to put a big dollop here of gel super glue, just to help lock everything in place. Now it's not that clean, but you're not going to see it once it's in place. once we put a bit of weathering underneath it. And again, I'm going to be careful just not to glue myself to the photo etch. So to replace the parts, obviously I have to mark cut lines I need to remove the original plastic from. Now by right I should have removed these before I mounted the upper lower hull, because it does make life a bit difficult for me. But I just wanted to kind of make the plastic as solid as possible. So I'm going to do a lot of test fitting just to make sure everything lines up, and just do small adjustments as I go. I'm not trying to do too much at once. I'm also just going to remove the headlight mount, as I have a replacement one coming from Tiger Model Designs that's got the convoy light without the cover on it. As if you look at the photos of 126, the actual convoy or the armoured cover of the light is being blown away. So I actually have a set on the way that replicates that. So once everything has been filed down and cleaned up, I'm just going to remove any of the burrs with a bit of Tamiya extra tin. And then it's going to mount everything in place with some Gorilla Gel Glue or Gorilla Super Glue. You can notice about one fender has been completely sheared away, and that's just, I literally just cut it into about maybe 1/4 left, and just basically bent everything to shape. And you can see me here just damaging the fender. So another thing I wanted to try with this build was some rolled steel effects for the armor plates. So I'm just going to take some Mr. Surfacer 1200, some of the Mr. Color lacquer thinner, and just mix it all together. On hindsight, I probably didn't actually have to tin the Mr. Surface 1200, as it's already quite a thin consistency. But again, it's just better to try to keep things as manageable as possible and do several layers. So I'm just going to carefully start painting this on with a paintbrush. Now, I've been quite careful to keep the Mr. Surface on areas I want for texture and nothing more. Also, we're being careful, I'm not trying to recreate a cast texture. This effect has to be very subtle. I'm just going to take a stippling brush that I just cut down from an old brush, and I'm going to start gently stippling the putty after maybe allowing it to stand for about 3 or 4 minutes on the fakel. So you can see the advantage of just moving in small sections. You can just do a small part at a time, blend it, add some texture to it, and just kind of do it bit by bit. As Mr. Surface does dry very quickly, so it's best not to try to rush yourself. You'll just make a mess of things and you'll absolutely hate your life. Now I've already mapped out where the 3-inch rounds are going to hit our phaco, just with a pencil here, just so I had an idea where we're later going to model them. And I'm just going to put our texture right over it. This is not really like an important step, it's just for myself, and I was trying to visualize how we were going to go about adding the battle damage. So with the rolled armor texture added in, now we're going to start adding some actual cast texture, and that's going to be applied to places like the gun mantlet and the cast ball mount for the bow machine gun. So I've allowed the Mr. Surface to dry for about 3 or 4 minutes on my palette, so it's turned into a bit of a gel, and I'm going to apply it very heavy onto this area here. Yes, Tamiya has included a very light cast texture, but I don't want it to be lost in the rolled steel texture. It's too light in my opinion. So and I also want it to be visually different than the rolled steel effect that we had done. So I'm going to put it down very heavy, and then I'm going to stipple it to create a pretty pronounced cast texture. Yes, this might be a bit out of scale for some people, but I want that visual difference. And then it's going to clean up this seam line here that I've gotten a little bit of the putty into. So with the Mr. Surface allowed to dry for 24 hours, I'm just going to come in with a very light sanding sponge and very gently sand back any areas I'm not too happy with. So I'm just going to give some light sands here and there where I felt I went a little bit too heavy with the rolled steel effect. And so now I'm just going to assemble the machine gun mount. So again, just cleaning up some glue marks here. So another thing I wanted to add to this build were torch cut marks from the manufacturer of this Panther. So all of these plates have very pronounced cut marks. So again, very much inspired by the Night Shift modeler. I'm going to start adding my own. Now again, this is all sped up, so it looks like I'm attacking it way more aggressively than I actually am. Once I'm happy with it, I'm just going to start cleaning up these cut marks with a little bit of extra tin, just to melt it back ever so slightly and subdue the cut marks. Because at the moment they're a little bit out of scale, but with a slight coat of extra tin, it does tend to reduce it ever so slightly and bring it back into scale. So I'm going to start adding some tried and tested weld seams. So there's a few weld seams on the glacis and the engine plate that are missing on the kit. We're going to add them using the stretch sprue method. So I'm just going to cut some appropriate lengths and just glue them in place. So again, it was a little bit extra tin. And I'm going to leave them set for about maybe 10 or 15 minutes before we continue with the next step. So once it's been allowed to dry for a few minutes, I'm just going to add a couple of pretty liberal coats of extra tin just to start melting and softening the stretch sprue, and then we're going to start sculpting in the well seams with our hobby blade here, or hobby knife. So again, same thing here, just a few coats of extra tin to melt the plastic ever so slightly. We don't want to drown the surface in extra tin or we'll attack everything. Just a little couple of thin coats will do it. Let it set for a couple of seconds, about 10 or 15 seconds, and then you can start working the melted plastic or the softened plastic with your hobby blade. And on the engine plate here, so you can see there's a couple of pronounced wells on the engine deck. So it's a very simple technique, but it looks very nice once it's done. So now I'm just going to add some of the photo etch brackets for the fenders. Again, these are teensy tiny, and I'm just going to fix these in place using liquid CA glue. This is just cheap stuff I bought from a discount shop or a pound shop. And I'm just going to very carefully place them where I want, or where they need to go, should I say. And I'm just going to lock them down. So you can see the weld details come out pretty nice on the rear of the tank. So now moving on to something I've never done really before in any of my builds is battle damage, and at least realistic battle damage. And again, this is highly inspired by the Night Shift modeler. Again, he's done a fantastic video on this, so I'll have links to these videos in the description. So I've mapped out where the three M10 hits came in from, and I'm just going to create a little bit of a punch here with my hobby blade or my hobby knife. Then I'm going to take kind of an intermediate drill bit. This is not the full diameter that we'll be using, but I'm just going to begin to cut with these. So I'm planning to do 2 full penetrations and a partial pen, just to make things a little bit interesting. And again, there's a little bit of artistic license here because there's no photographs of 126 where she got hit. So we're going to use our 2.3mm drill bit, which is the equivalent of a 76mm impact or a 3-inch impact. They're the same bore with the 76 and the 3-inch anti-tank guns or GMC gun. So as I was saying, there's no photograph showing the 3 hits that knocked out 126. Now, after action reports state that she got hit by 3 rounds fired by a single M10, and it was hit in the engine compartment, and that's about it. So I'm not saying this is how she was hit, but this is the best information I have. So now once we've bored our holes, we're going to fill them in with some putty. In this case, I'm using Perfect Plastic putty. You can use any type of ready mix putty you have. So I'm just going to allow that to stand for a couple of seconds, and I'm going to take a back of a brush that I dipped into water, and I'm just going to push to create the kind of the crater of the shell hit from the spalling damage. Same thing here. I'm just going to again put a generous blob of putty in just to fill in that hole. Allow it to stand for a couple of seconds, and then I'm just going to punch it with the back of the brush again to create those distinctive craters that you get from shell hits, as well as it also kind of creates how the steel will peel from the impact as well as the AP round, parts to steel to get in. Now at the moment these craters are a little bit too pronounced, but we're going to work those back. So you can see the 2 penetrating hits and then the partial pen. And again, I'm just kind of blending out some of this just to create some spalling damage and what have you. And again, if you don't like anything, it's really simple. You can just come in with like a hobby blade or even like a cocktail stick here and just scrape it away if you don't like it. A lot of it's dried quite firmly, so I'm just going to, with my hobby blade or my hobby knife here, I'm just going to start slowly and gently scraping away some of the more pronounced ridges that I don't want. You'll also see me scoring the plastic, so this is some of the shrapnel and spall damage that you'll get from an impact, as basically spatters of heated armor plate and also casing from the shell basically fragments against the armor plate. So it's not 100% perfect, but I'm pretty happy with it. It's my first time ever trying it, and I'm not really one to do practice goes, which is not necessarily a good thing. I just tend to go for it, and I kind of got away with it. So that's part one of this build. I know it might not be as exciting for some of you, but I really enjoyed working on this so far. I got to try a lot of techniques I'd never tried before, such as rolled steel textures, battle damage, and also just trying to encourage myself to use photo etch, which I'm not really great with and tend to shy away with. So in part two, we're going to be trying to replicate the battle damage to the storage bins. We're going to start adding the side skirts and getting the running gear underway, as well as starting to work on our turret. So it's going to be a really exciting build. I'm really looking forward to getting really stuck into this. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Do join me next time when we actually get proper stuck into it. So thank you so much, and again a big thank you to Mark from the Panther Research Group on Facebook for all his help. Big thank you again. So thanks so much guys. I've been Shane. I'll catch you in the next video.